Hey there, my name is Shane Craddock, and this is the Inner Edge podcast, where I share a different take on how to lead and live a sustainable, high performance life. Over the course of different episodes, I'm going to challenge the belief that tension, stress, and struggle are essential to success and creativity. My experience is that there's an easier way, there's a better way, and indeed there's an essential way that we need to explore for the times that we live in. So let's go ahead, let's jump in and explore. Hello there, Shane Craddock here. This is the Inner Edge. You're very welcome. And today we are talking about something that probably for a lot of people, as soon as you mention the word, they inwardly go, oh no, here we go. It's about vision, the art of vision. Now, unfortunately, I think the way the corporate world has embraced and used vision has really caused a problem because, as a corporate, I guess, refugee myself, and as somebody who has also worked with companies in creating visions and I suppose vision statements and all that kind of malarkey for quite a while, I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly around this. But there is an art to vision and in doing it right. And I suppose what I learned maybe through mistakes and maybe by chance falling on what actually works really well, that's what I want to point to today. So listen, I could spend hours talking about vision, the good, the bad, and the terrible, but this is only going to be a few minutes of exploration and hopefully inspiration for you. Now, Jonathan Swift, the famous writer, once said, "The vision is the art of seeing what is invisible to others." And I can relate to that big time. And I'm sure that you're listening to this. Maybe there's been times in your work, in your life, where you've had vision yourself, and maybe times where you've had fog, where there is no vision. And I think that's a universal experience. But what I'm going to say today is maybe to be more deliberate about creating space and time for your true vision to come in. Now, what do you mean by true vision, Shane? Okay, well, let's see if I can clarify this. I honestly think, from my own experience, that most corporate visions are a kind of a waste of time. They will spend a lot of money very often with clever consultants, creating really fantastically clear and inspiring, apparently, vision statements. And you put these up around offices and everything else. But that doesn't mean that anybody's buying into it. And most of the time, it doesn't, because really the most important thing when it comes to vision is what's in the leader's head, in their mind. What do they actually see? What do they believe? There is that famous statement which comes from the Bible, of all places, which is, without vision, the people will perish. So even there, it's saying, look, the vision is important. But I think there's two ways I'm going to point to looking at vision. Okay, there's outer vision, and then there's inner vision. Now, outer vision to me is what most companies do, which is, look, let's try and create something that we want to do. But very often, I would think outer vision is linked to ego, and I think that's been one of the problems with the world and in business over the last few decades, is that a lot of the vision has been egocentric, hasn't thought about the environment, hasn't thought about communities, hasn't thought about the people in those organizations. And so there are casualties. And the only winners perhaps are the owners or the shareholders. And I think you can see that. I don't need to get into that too much. But what's interesting is that one of the, I suppose, advocates for vision, I guess, would have been the original business consultant, Peter Drucker, very famous man. And he had a statement that said, pretty much, you can't predict the future, but you can create it. Now, that's true whether it's coming from your ego or whether it's not. And this brings me into the other vision, inner vision. Now, you could say, well, all vision is inner, and that would be true. But when I'm talking about an inner vision, I really mean more coming from a deeper part of yourself. Maybe it's an inspired vision coming from outside the ego, something that perhaps is meant to happen, not just for your own ego or for anybody else's ego, but actually maybe for the betterment of the planet, the people in it. And I think there's a huge amount of movement in this kind of an area, even if you look at organizations like MIT, universities like MIT, and also Joseph Jaworski, my colleague, who I've interviewed on my podcast before, we're worth checking out. He would talk about source-enabled leadership and the entrepreneurial impulse, and really there's this understanding, which now science is looking at, around actually a concept that they call the emerging future. And the emerging future is essentially the future that actually wants to emerge. And if you're calm, clear, centered, and do the work on the inner side of yourself, you're more inclined to get in touch with the natural movement and perhaps what I'm going to call a natural vision. Now, most of us, unfortunately, well, maybe not you, have lost connection to that inner place that's home to the source enabled vision, to the inner authentic vision. Because when it comes from that kind of deeper place, it generally is more harmonious. It generally is coming from a different place. Again, I'd say outside of ego. And it's often home to these maybe deeper dreams. Now, not the dreams of having the massive house and the plane and, whatever else takes your fancy, I guess, right? I mean, they're fun things. But I've worked with enough people who've done those things to realize, oh, hold on, that's not necessarily authentic success or an authentic vision or even what I would call true success. And that's why inner work, working on yourself, is so important, because what you're ultimately trying to do with inner work is clear away the inner junk that's holding you back, that taints vision, that blocks the actual, real, true, deeper, authentic vision for you in your life and also potentially your business. Why? Because that junk, it removes doubt, it removes the inner critic, it removes the ego. And a big part of my own work is to help people clear that junk away, and also to help make, as Jonathan Swift said, to make the invisible visible. As in, very often what's blocking you is invisible. So it's very, like, there's no doubt about it. I've done it. I do this with clients sometimes, is that, I can say, listen, we can create the future. So what's the vision? But very often that vision that comes out of somebody initially is going to be based on their past. And maybe when they were 7, they saw somebody with a big Rolls Royce car and they decide, well, that's part of my vision. It's all very random. Or maybe they say, well, I'm going to get millions. Or maybe they say, I'm going to become famous. But why? Very often it's coming from a lack, or it's from something of feeling unworthy. And so you're always have some sort of a vision. Sometimes that vision is unconscious and you're creating something that you don't want without realizing it. So to get in touch with the kind of a truer, more authentic vision, which is what I'm pointing to today, both personal and actually business, the enemy of that is a busy mind and a mind full of junk. And that's where, okay, you can work on calming your mind, but also it's honestly really worth going in to dig around and hunt for those blind spots. And that's what I find really makes a difference. Now, without a doubt, I think communing with nature is a great enabler for tapping into something deeper. I know Joseph Jaworski would be a big proponent of that himself as well. He often talk about having wilderness retreats, sustained time in nature, but there's more. So it's hugely valuable to make dedicated time to tap into and open the doors for a potential deeper inner vision to come in. The problem is that people are so busy and busy-minded that they will probably know this logically even, but not necessarily make time for it. And so the enemy is a busy mind. The enemy is just being busy, busy, busy. Now, very often, I'm sure you can relate to this. Sometimes, you could be somewhere, especially in nature. It's a great, like, communing with nature is a great enabler. Joseph Jaworski would be a big proponent of this. He's run wilderness retreats where you're spending several days camping by yourself in a kind of a controlled environment, but still you're out alone. And that's a great way to help your mind settle, become calm, and to tune into something deeper. Again, this source. And there's something in this. I've seen it time and time again. It's one of my greatest interest areas at the moment. And so what I'm wondering as I'm speaking to you is, in relation to, let's see, can we help your vision come out maybe more authentic, what I would call true vision, which enables true success, which is a more balanced, healthier version, more authentic version of success for you. But if you had more courage, what would you do that you're not doing? If you had more courage, what would you go for? What would you look to create? That's worth sitting with as a question, because it might initially allow you to tap into that deeper area of yourself where this more inspired vision comes from a different place. It doesn't come from your ego, because very often the ego will be all about just you. An inspired vision generally is something that relates to your core values at a deep level. It's energizing. It might be different to what everybody else is telling you should do, though. Very often it is. But actually, at its core, it's what you're built for, perhaps what you're born for. And I genuinely believe, it's my experience so far, that most people are not living a life that is probably their true path. And I think most businesses are not really connecting with that deeper inner vision that I'm talking about. And really, the enabler of that is for the leaders and the leader to spend time in inner work, which is very different to the way we've been conditioned. And that's why I suppose I'm trying to help maybe encourage that change and maybe exploration for a different way of doing things. But the payoff to themselves is huge. The payoff to the company and the people in the company is massive. And the payoff to the world and the community connected to that business and that leader is even greater. And that's exciting to me because of what potential change we can bring in, especially with the time coming to us with AI and everything else. This is really important work. So for you, again, if you had more courage, what would you do in your life? What would you do with your business? It's really worth spending a little bit of time on that as a starting point. And maybe from today, you could actually spend a bit more time communing with nature and getting out of your head and just being open to perhaps a vision finding you. Because I do believe that there's a vision out there for everybody. But when you're busy or maybe locked up with your ego, I just think that that vision, it just sits there waiting for a chance. So maybe we can give it that chance. And for what it's worth, time spent relaxing your mind, time spent in silence, time spent in nature is a super way to enable that inner vision. That's it for this week. Ciao for now.